here tonight. Welcome to Radiant Church. My name's Seth. I'm the pastor here. And you guys feeling good tonight? You got enough coffee in you? Or if you're like me and fasting coffee, enough tea in you, right? Any tea drinkers? Oh, man. I'm sorry. I feel sorry for you. It's like watered down coffee. I have the days counted down. As much as the 21 days of prayer and fasting is incredibly powerful, I have to admit, I do have the days counted down so I can have another cup of coffee. But anyway, it is, again, great to have you here. I do want to just highlight a few things when you came in. Hopefully you got a program. Inside that program, you'll find some message notes to help you follow along with today's message. You also find an orange connection card that do encourage you. Just take a few moments sometime tonight, drop that in the offering bucket on your way out tonight as a way for us to know how to be praying for you, as well as we'd love to send you a little more information about what we're about and who we are as a church. So again, encourage you to do that. Also, we got a few things kind of on the calendar coming up. We've got a men's retreat that's happening February 2nd through the 4th, and I do encourage you to check that out. You can actually go to the website, radiantchurchnewport.com, and there's a link that you can click on for that, and you'll find all the information and how you can sign up and get connected with that. I'm telling you, it's going to be a great time, a great way just to connect with some guys from some other churches in the area. As well as with one another, and most importantly with God. So that's going to be a fun time that we've got coming up. We've also got a bunch of ladies' activities. We've got a craft night that's coming up, and in fact, actually on your way out, I encourage you to stop at the info table out there, and you'll see a whole list of some of the ladies' events we got coming up. I know there's a movie night that's coming up as well, and so I encourage you to sign up for that. Ladies, a great opportunity to just get connected with those things as well. And then finally, we're really encouraging, those who have an interest in getting involved with kids, because we could really use just a little bit more support, a little more help in our kids ministry. And so if you have an interest in that, if that's a remote passion of yours at all, what we're looking for is we're looking for people that'd be willing to volunteer just once a month for 2 months. This is total trial period. So, 2 months, it's it. You don't have to continue on past that if it's not your thing. But we're looking for people to commit for 2 months, just once a month. And so if that's something you'd be interested in, I think when you came in again, there should have been a form in your program. Encourage you to check that out. If you didn't get one, you can stop at the info table. And again, encourage you to fill that out. And I'd love to meet with you, talk with you more about that. So with that, why don't we go and pray for our kids and dismiss them off to their kids' classes tonight. Let's go and pray. Father, we thank you for our kids, the blessing they bring to our lives, the joy they bring to our lives. I just pray they would have an amazing time in their class tonight. Be with the teachers, encourage them, strengthen them, and give them just a message that would just remind our kids just how precious and valuable they are in the eyes of God. And so, Lord, we love you and praise you. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's give it up for our kids. They head back to their classes. All right. Well, the rest of you, why don't you stand up, find 2 or 3 people, and let them know how glad you are they're with us tonight. I'm going to try to do it at the end. Okay.
Glad you're here, Seth.
I'm glad you guys are here. We got a Vikings fan.
I know. I mean, let him
That's really random.
It's okay. I would rather cheer for the Vikings than anybody else.
Yeah, that's true. I want them to be, like the Eagles. I can't cheer for the Eagles. And I can't cheer for the Patriots. That does sort of limit our options. All right. That's a very staticky sound. So anyway, why don't you make your way back to your seats and let's just dive into tonight's stuff. Again, we are continuing this series called Uphill Habits. And the past couple weeks, we've been talking about how we all have uphill dreams, but unfortunately, we oftentimes have downhill habits in most cases. We've got the uphill dreams of, wanting to, get in better shape or get, our finances in a better condition or a better state. But unfortunately, we've got downhill habits that keep so many of us from ever moving uphill, ever seeing those dreams, ever seeing God's call realized on our lives. And the challenge the challenge with this is that what you and I do are sort of the results, what we end up in life are sort of the results of our habits too. I mean, these are incredible, powerful things. I mean, we talked about how you and I, we were ultimately the result of what we repeatedly do in life. What we repeatedly do, what we repeatedly think about, what we repeatedly act upon. Our habits are incredibly powerful. They shape so much of our lives. In fact, I put it this way, is that our habits, while we form habits, our habits ultimately form us. And there's something powerful enough that they just can't be eliminated. Like you can't just eliminate cold turkey, get rid of a downhill habit. Like a downhill habit in our life, whatever it is, it's ultimately got to be replaced with another habit. It's got to be replaced with a good habit, with what we've been talking about, sort of keystone habits or holy habits, habits that have a way of affecting all the rest of our affecting change in all the rest of our lives. They bring an entourage. They affect every other habit, every other action in our life. And so the first week we talked about sort of the holy habit of seeking God first, putting him first in our day, putting him first in our week, putting him first in our lives. Last week we talked about the importance of having a keystone habit of a new perspective, having a new attitude, every morning waking up and fixing our thoughts on the good things of God, the blessings of God, not just, being the result or allowing our attitude or our lives just to be the result of our circumstances, but to rise above that, to have an attitude that focuses first on God and his goodness and his greatness and the goodness of him. And today we're taking it to another level, which is we're talking about the keystone habit of a new identity. Keystone habit of a new identity. And to kind of talk about this, unpack it, just to really pretty much have one big thought on this, but to get there, we kind of have to plow through a few other kind of parts to kind of lead to this. So encourage you, hang in there with me, and we're going to get to it. But to kind of get to what we're talking about here and to start unpacking this, I don't know, any Law and Order fans in the house? Any Law and Order fans? Yeah. My mother-in-law, she's a huge Law and Order fan. Like she can watch 24 straight hours of Law and Order and CSI. In fact, it's always kind of humorous watching her get in arguments with Holly of which show that they love is the worst influence on Austin. Because like she loves like CSI, my wife likes The Bachelor, and they're both like, which is the worst influence on him? And of course, I think they actually agreed that neither of them were the worst influence on Austin, but actually it was the show I'm into, Deadliest Catch, that's actually the worst influence on my boy between the actions and the yelling and the screaming. But anyway, my mother-in-law, she loves Law and Order. And Law and Order, it's always interesting. They have this big build-up to the case, and it typically gets right down to it. And one of the key factors in a final verdict, and what ultimately decides the case, what the case lands on, is this thing called motive. This thing called motive. Like motive matters in relation to the final verdict. And listen, I share that because, listen, in our lives, if we hope to have lasting change, if it's more than just, a behavior modification, maybe we change a few habits here or there and it lasts for a long time. If we actually hope to have lasting change in our lives, we have to understand that our motives matter. The motives driving that change in our lives really does matter. That motive to change. And listen, motive, much like habits, is an incredibly powerful thing as well. I mean, think about it. Everything you've accomplished in life was driven by a motive. There was motivation behind you. You graduated high school because you were motivated to. You succeeded in your career, or you started a business because you were motivated to. Maybe you're in a job and you had to do some job training for it, take some extra classes because you were motivated to. And in saying that, notice I'm not saying that the motivation was necessarily even a good motivation. Sometimes the motivations that drive us most can sometimes be some really negative ones, like shame or guilt or obligation, right? And so we've got these motives, and motives are interesting. Motives can actually really, if you start to break them down, much like if you broke down a habit, motives, there's layers to them. There's parts that make up a motive. You know, every one of our motivations are typically driven by one of two things. Either it's driven, you're motivated by something, or you're motivated to something. So put it this way, like some of you were motivated by something, like when you came to church. Some of you were motivated by maybe your mom, you know, or a family member to get to church, right? You know, and it's like, well, you got to be in church. If you don't get in church, you know, you're going to pay when you get home. I mean, it's like, you know, that you're motivated by something. For some of you, you showed up to church because you were motivated to something. You were motivated to hoping that God would meet you in a very real way tonight, that God would speak something into your life that will encourage you. His word would build you up and speak some truth into your situation, speak some truth into your life, or maybe just that moment of worship, being able to raise your eyes, raise your perspective, to be reminded of God's goodness and God's grandeur and God's greatness in your life. But we've got these motivations. We're motivated so often by something and to something. In fact, you could put it this way to kind of break it down, is that we're motivated to something, what would be sort of the what in our lives. You know, when it comes to change, especially, you know, kind of shifting it to this idea of seeing change in our lives, oftentimes we're motivated to change by a what, like the results of our life. You know, especially this time of year. You know, it's the beginning of the new year. You know, there's all these things you want to see differently. You know, maybe your hope for differently in your relationship, in your job, in your finances. There's this motivation to see this year is different than last year. And listen, this can be a great starting point. You know, being motivated by the what can be a great starting point. The problem is a lot of us, we never move beyond that, though. It's the start and finish of our motivation. And here's the danger of that, is that when it starts and finishes with just the what as our motivation, what can tend to happen, we talked about this a little bit last week, is we think that the answer to our situation, the answer to our job, the answer to our problems is that I just need something new. I need a new spouse, rather than, you know, working with the spouse I've got, working in the relationship I've got. I need a new job, or rather than making most of the job that I currently have. I need to find a new church rather than really seeing the best and playing a part in building this church or a church. You know, again, it's this tendency that we just sort of make it, when it's all fixated, our motivation is simply on the what, is to think that the answer is just getting something new. Getting something new. You know, a new box, right? But here's the problem with that, is that even if you get that new thing, you get that new job, you find yourself in that new church, the problem is that wherever you go, there you are. Right? Wherever you go, there you are. And last week we talked about this, how so much of the issues, so much of the problems, so much of the box that we're living in, good, bad, ugly of it, is because of the patterns in our lives, right? You know, Romans 12:2, it speaks about that. You know, do not be conformed to the patterns of the world. That the problem's the pattern. It's these habits in our lives, oftentimes these downhill habits that have shaped so much of our lives. See, and so oftentimes it's not simply a what, but that can be a motivation. Again, it's a good starting point sometimes is the what, but we can't finish with that. We can't just stop there. The other motivation is not to something, but it's to be motivated by something. And we could put it this way as our why. And a why is a really powerful motivator as well, right? And there's some really good whys. In fact, I was reading sort of the history of the Spartan army, and kind of what made them so strong and made them, you know, such a formidable force. You know, that kind of, you know, see the movies, hear the stories of like the 300 Spartans that faced, you know, countless Persians. And in this book that I was reading, the author put that one of the reasons that the Spartan army was so fierce and they were so dominant and they were so hard to beat was because they were fighting for something. Like they were fighting for their loved ones. They were fighting for their homeland. They were fighting for their homes. They were fighting for their families, all the people around them. They had something they loved that was motivating them. The unfortunate thing, though, you know, for the Persians, and the reason the Persians always kept getting wiped out was because they weren't fighting because a love for something, but they were fighting out of obligation. Most of them were slaves. Most of them had been captured soldiers from other armies. They were made to fight, and they didn't want to be there. They didn't want to be there. They had no why, whereas the Spartans had a why. And as a result, the Spartans, again, were one of the most formidable forces out there. See, there can be a good why that motivates us. But I think if we're honest, though, I think for a lot of us, much like I think we tend to have broken whats that motivate us, I think a lot of us have a lot of broken whys that motivate our lives as well. And what I mean by broken whys is that we tend to, if we're honest, we really take a look at some of the things that we're pursuing, some of the things we're chasing after, some of the things we're longing for, some of the things we're hoping for. They're made up so many of broken whys, like the why of wanting acceptance from others, or wanting approval, from others, or looking for our status to come from a job, or looking for more money or stuff, and in and of themselves not necessarily so bad, but when you're looking at that as being the source, the motivating factor, what it creates is this sort of broken why. And so we've got these broken whys and these broken whats that sort of motivate us and drive us. And it's that kind of at the core pushing so many of us and would drive so many of us to want change. And I think is also the reason why so many of us fall short when it comes to lasting change. Because the truth is, if we want to experience lasting change, if we want to, actually get to the top of the hill, whatever that hill is, whatever that mountain is, we want to get to the dream, we want to get to the call, we want to get to that place that God's called us or led us to. Listen, we've got to have a motivation that goes even deeper than simply a why or a what. See, that motivation that you and I need to have, if we're going to move up the hill, it's found in a who. It's found in the who. It starts actually with this question of understanding and really looking at your life. Who are you? Who are you really? Because if you don't have the who, the why and the what's always going to be broken. If you don't have the who, if you don't really know who you are in Christ, the why and the what is never going to create lasting change in your life. It'll get you started. It'll get you halfway there. It'll get you, it'll create some change in your life, but it'll never create lasting change. The motivation we've got to find in our lives is answering that question, being able to answer that question, who are you in relation to Christ? It was interesting that book, Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, it's interesting that he goes on, he shares the story of the guy who started Alcoholics Anonymous. And he goes on to kind of share sort of the history of it, the 12 steps on the program. And he said, and he's describing this. He said about maybe 15 years ago, a lot of the psychologists were, really kind of unpacking this, like, really studying it. Like, does this really work? like, does the Alcoholics Anonymous really work? I mean, do these 12 steps really work? And they were able to, when they really unpacked it, when they really looked at it, they broke it down. 6 of the steps were really a lot of it based on a lot of the stuff we just talked about, of habits, unpacking what the habits are, what's the motivating factor, taking ownership of things in your life, of decisions we make, things like that. But there was another 6 of them that were more centered around relationships with others, relationships with God. And it's interesting. So these psychologists, what they did was for a number of years is they just took the first 6. They just studied the 6 because they just kind of discounted the other 6 as well. That's just, the guy was just, he was a little different. He was a little weird. So they just kind of discounted that. And they just took the first 6 and did all these studies. And they saw some results. They saw some impact. They saw some change. But the problem was that it was an incomplete formula. And I like what he goes on to say as he's describing this in the book. He says, as they were doing all the study, he goes, listen, if you identify the cues and rewards, you can change the routine. This is kind of what they discovered, at least most of the time. But for some habits, however, there's only one other ingredient that's necessary, and that's belief. He says, even if you give people better habits, it doesn't repair why they started drinking in the first place. Eventually, they'll have a bad day, and no new routine is going to make everything seem okay. What can make a difference is believing that they can cope with that stress without alcohol. And again, it comes back to this idea of belief, but specifically this around this idea of identity. See, it's a belief in who we are in relationship with Christ. And that's ultimately what he kind of brings it back to, and really what these psychologists really even came to land on was that faith is essential. Our relationship with God is essential in terms of motivating lasting change. Our relationship with others is essential in terms of motivating lasting change. And so it's this powerful idea that listen, we've got to understand and we've got to have a belief in terms of understanding who we are in our relationship with Christ if we want to experience true lasting change. And listen, this is more than, again, pop psychology or positive talk. This is more than Stuart Smalling yourself. When probably if you're like under 25, you might have to ask like somebody who's seen SNL. But you remember Stuart Smalling? He's like, man, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me, right? That's not what we're talking about here. This isn't like just positive self-talk, man, and pump yourself up. You can do it, you can make it. This isn't about lying to yourself. Trying to make yourself out to be something that you're not, right? And in fact, I was in preparing for this message, came across some kind of false identities, some names that were just kind of not maybe the real person. But here's one, like a Jedi Knight. I like this one. That was a good one. Check out another one. Batman bin Superman. And they're kind of